You are asleep in the open. No walls, no lock on a door because there is no door. Somewhere in the dark, something is moving through the grass, and you will not know if it is a hyena or a rival group until it is already close enough to matter. This was not a nightmare. This was Tuesday. For most of human history, the world did not ask permission before it hurt you. There was no emergency room 10 minutes away, no antibiotics, no police to call. Your body was the only defense system you had, and it often lost. You have probably heard the version of prehistory that sounds almost peaceful. Small bands of hunter-gatherers working a few hours a day, sharing meat, sleeping when tired, free of rent and traffic and inboxes. That version is not entirely wrong. But it leaves out the part where prehistoric life could also kill you in ways modern life almost never does, and in numbers that should stop you cold. Start with the body count. Anthropologists Michael Gurven and Kaplan spent years compiling mortality data across dozens of hunter-gatherer and forager populations, from the Hadza of Tanzania to the Ache of Paraguay. Their findings, published in the journal Population and Development Review, showed something brutal in the most literal sense. In many of these societies, roughly 1 in 4 infants did not survive their first year. Nearly half of all children died before reaching adulthood. If you made it to 15, your odds improved dramatically, but the climb to get there was soaked in loss. Think about what that means for a mother. Not one grieving pregnancy in a lifetime, often several. Grief was not an event. It was a recurring feature of being alive. Now add violence. For decades, a comforting myth persisted that prehistoric humans were gentle, that organized killing was invented later, alongside agriculture and kings and property lines. Archaeologist Lawrence Keeley challenged that directly in his research on prehistoric warfare, arguing that small-scale societies experience conflict death rates far higher, proportionally, than most 20th century wars. Not because ancient people were somehow crueler, because there was no larger authority to stop a dispute from escalating into a spear through a rib cage. The evidence is not just theoretical. At a site called Nataruk near Lake Turkana in Kenya, researcher Marta Mirazon-Lar and her team uncovered the remains of at least 27 individuals dating back roughly 10,000 years. Men, women, a pregnant woman, children, skulls fractured, arrowheads embedded in bone, hands bound. This was not an accident. This was a massacre, frozen in sediment, from a time before farms, before cities, before writing. So picture it. Reconstruct the scene. You are part of a band of maybe 25 people. You know every one of them by name, by laugh, by the specific way they cough at night. There is no anonymity here, no stranger you can walk past without consequence, which also means there is no escape from conflict. If someone in your group has wronged another band, that grudge does not stay contained. It can follow you for years, resurface at a river crossing, end in bloodshed decades later. Meanwhile, disease waits in the wings. A cut on your foot from a sharp rock is not a minor inconvenience. Without antiseptics, a small wound can turn septic within days. Anthropologist James Sussman, who spent years studying the Juhonsi and the Kalahari, has documented how thin the margin was between everyday injury and death. A broken leg from a fall was not something you rested and healed from in a cast. It could end your ability to hunt, to gather, to keep pace with a group that had to keep moving to survive. In some cases, it ended your life outright, either from the injury itself or from the starvation that followed when you could no longer contribute. And starvation itself was never far off. Seasonal droughts, failed hunts, sudden freezes. Skeletal evidence from sites across Europe and Africa shows something called Harris lines, faint markings in bone that record periods of arrested growth caused by malnutrition. Entire childhoods written into the skeleton, showing where hunger interrupted development, sometimes more than once. Here is the twist, though, the one that reframes everything you just heard. Despite all of this, despite the violence, the infant mortality, the disease, the hunger, many anthropologists argue that day-to-day life for adult hunter-gatherers was not one of constant grinding labor or despair. Marshall Sahlins, in his influential essay on what he called the original affluent society, pointed out that many foraging groups worked fewer hours per week securing food than the average modern employee spends at a desk. The brutality was not constant. It was episodic, sharp, sudden, and often fatal, but interspersed with the long stretches of rest, storytelling, and connection that most modern humans, buried in schedules and screens, rarely experience. That is the paradox worth sitting with. Prehistoric life was not brutal in the way a war zone is brutal, with danger every waking hour. It was brutal the way a minefield is brutal. Long, ordinary stretches of calm, punctuated by moments where a single misstep, a single infection, a single bad encounter could end everything. You never knew which day would be ordinary and which day would be the one that took your child, your leg, your life. Compare that to now. You live in a world where a toothache is treated with a pill instead of a slow, agonizing infection, where a broken bone is set, not a death sentence, where the odds of your child surviving to adulthood are not a coin flip, but something closer to a near certainty. That safety is so total, so invisible that most people never once in their lives consciously appreciate it. It is simply the water you swim in, but the same brain that got you here, the brain shaped by tens of thousands of years of that unpredictable danger, is still running. It still flinches at sudden noises. It still catastrophizes over minor symptoms. It still lies awake at 3 in the morning bracing for threats that mostly no longer exist. Your ancestors needed that vigilance to survive Nataruk level stakes. You inherited the vigilance without the stakes, which is part of why modern anxiety can feel so disproportionate to modern danger. The wiring is ancient. The world it was built for is mostly gone. So the next time you stub your toe and reach for a bandage instead of praying it does not turn septic, or hear a strange noise at night and remember it is probably just the pipes. Remember what that same ordinary moment would have meant 30,000 years ago. Remember the mother who buried more children than she raised. Remember the 27 people at Nataruk who never saw it coming. You are asleep, safe behind a locked door, no lion in the grass, no rival band at the river. Just you and the quiet and a level of safety your ancestors could not have imagined even in their most hopeful dreams.